Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Matt from Rocky's War Room, and we are back again to talk about Antares, Beyond the Gates of Antares, a game by Rick Priestley, and of course, Tim Bancroft. Hey, Tim Bancroft is with us tonight, or this morning, I guess, tonight for him. How's it going, Tim?
It's a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much, Ricky.
Afternoon. Okay. It's wee morning for me. And we also have the awesome guys over on a channel that is dedicated to Beyond the Gates of Antares. Thank God somebody else is doing it as well, or doing it. It's Tabletop Warlords, Kevin and Sergey. Hello, fellas.
What's up, Matt?
Hey there.
And you can hear each other now, right?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
good. Okay, good. And of course, one of our show favorites, Mick Murray, is with us.
How are you now?
There he is. He's our conscientious objector. No, I'm just kidding. He's the outside guy looking in who doesn't know anything about the Concord or Beyond the Gates of Antares for that matter, and he's going to listen and ask the questions that someone who has not played the game or has not read the rules or the fluff per se. And he will be that person to answer those questions or ask those questions. I'm sorry. You guys will answer them, but he will ask them. And so will I, I'm sure, along the way. I've read the fluff. Of course, as you guys know, I've been around since Beyond the Gates of Antares came out. And it's been a constant love for me. And Concord is the army I've played the most of. It's probably because it came in a starter set.
Yeah, it's often the case. Yeah,
to be fair. And Algren are the other two, but we'll get into them later. They've creeped in as one of my favorites. It's Antares. It's all my favorites. Anyway, so we're talking Concord, and we're going to keep this short and sweet if we can, about an hour. So when I break in with a sheep bat, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to keep the conversation moving. If you guys have any questions, please ask them now. We will get to them in the second half of the show. And last but not least, Tim, you are one of the creators. Please tell us, what are the Concord? Where did they come from?
I have to say, Rick is actually the creator of this whole universe, and it's worth us saying that. I've just picked it up as the sort of like person responsible for it at Warlord, though I'm not supposed to be working at the moment. So anything I say at the moment is not representative of anything which Warlord have said. We are furloughed, obviously, because of this COVID crisis. So, but anyway, what are the Concord? The Concord is a super huge, a vast, technologically advanced interstellar civilization consisting of millions of planets. I tried to work out the population the other day, and after I got up to several quadrillion, I gave up.
Wow.
It's just when you think there could be billions on each planet and there's millions of planets, you just think, no, give up. Basically, though, it's a civilization consisting predominantly of pan-human beings and intelligent drone citizens all living together, and they're sort of like a rather sheltered idyll, I suppose, or idyll, I suppose you could say. There are some aliens in there, but it's mostly pan-humans and intelligent drones. The key thing about it, though, is that the lives of all its citizens, human, alien, or drone, are guided and governed by an all-pervasive intelligent nanosphere, the IMTEL. Now, nanosphere is a collection of nanospore, and it's a nanospore which powers everything in the advanced technology of Antares, whether it gives power, communications, knowledge, and in the IMTEL, intelligence. The leaders of this population, trillions and trillions, are the New Who. New humans, they are the ultimate evolution of humanity. They are incredibly intelligent, and they are just automatically linked into this nanosphere. Sorry, but tongues are going everywhere. Nanosphere.
There's a lot of nanos in there.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more like Isaurian if there's tongues going everywhere.
Yeah, tongues going everywhere. Yeah, it's the tendrils, and they can just command it with a thought, basically. They have an army, which is what we're talking about in the game, called the Concord Combined Command, that uses just about the most advanced technology in Antarian space. So that's it in a nutshell. It was founded, though, about 1323 years ago, depending on which supplement you're using, by the Isaurian. I don't know what you call it. by the Isaurians. They were a very, very ancient, very, very advanced civilization, and they were reconnected to the huge Antares nexus. And if you don't know about the nexus, it's probably worth going to www.gatesofantares.com, because that shows you what the nexus is. It's a huge star with loads of wormholes in it. So Isauria was connected to the nexus about 1323 years ago, and they then founded the Pan-Human Concord, this collection of all sorts of panhumans. Panhumans being all sorts of different human morphs, of course. About 300 years later, they then split. There we go. Rocky's showing some of the Concord troopers, the Concord Combined Command troopers there. About 300 years later, the Isaurian Senatex, having established this Concord, which was spreading out around the universe of Antares, they then separated from their own Concord because they got corrupted or infected by the nanosphere of a alien race who used a biosilicon basis for their nanosphere rather than a purely artificial basis. Now, the alien race was the Tsan, and the Isaurians had been at war with them for a long time. So now we've got the Pan-Human Concord, who is having to fight off their founders, if you see what I mean, who is the Isaurians, the Isaurian Senatex. And they are also trying to expand on their borders, whereas right in the middle of the Concord, you find loads and loads of highly protected, very, very sheltered people living in, I don't know what you could say, some form of utopia. Does that make sense?
That's actually.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I just didn't want to go on. There's so much to say, but
see, Warlord Games needs to definitely have you narrate like an audiobook, Tim. That was fantastic.
I would 100% listen to that.
100%.
Thank you very much. Here is the story. Once upon a time, are we sitting comfortably, children? I actually have in front of me I don't know what you call it. It's a data core from version 2, which is version 2 of the rules are coming out too. And it says here in a call out box, why play the Pan-Human Concord? So are you okay if I read some of that, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go for it.
Says here, the armies of the Concord are referred to as the Concord Combined Command, a separate branch or shard, and every separate bit within the Concord is called a shard, of the Imtel, allowing for military activity, because normally the Concord, being a utopia, wouldn't allow for military activity, bit anathema. As the Concord values the lives of its subjects very greatly, it tries to equip them with the best and most advanced weapons possible. And those are the pictures which Matt showed us earlier. It's got tough hyperlight armor. It's got plasma weaponry. They've got close support drones and highly effective drone vehicles. The clean aesthetic of their armor is suggestive of such highly advanced technology. The Imtel also tries to find a place for all the pan-humans in the Concord. So units and even individuals of very different pan-human morphs can be found. On the whole, it then goes in to explain what the Concord is best at. On the whole, the Concord armies tend to suit players who prefer to keep at a distance and shoot their opponents rather than get stuck in hand-to-hand. Even the basic squads are really effective, able to vary the amount of firepower they lay down and even pick out multiple targets in a turn, which is important in Antares. It's all based on a pin system. So the more pins you get, the less likely you are to be able to respond to an opponent. And then on top of that, you've got the New who can be devastating, but they do need to be protected. And then you've got a few specialist units, such as the Deadly Crass, who revel in close combat. And the drones, they've got a variety of different drones who are really quite nasty. The drones, if we go on to those, they are intelligent. They're basically like single-person units, if you like. They can lay down some pretty nasty suppression fire with plasma light support weapons. Some of them even have a plasma cannon for anti-tank duties. But one of the key things about a Concord force is that they've got loads and loads of smaller drones called probes and buddy drones, which you'd see on some of those you'd see on a modern battlefield. You know, like the drones on the spotter drones you'd see on a battlefield now, the Ravens, for example, not just the big eyes in the sky that we actually have. Those sort of drones act as targeting functions, they act as spotters, they act as medi drones. They can heal you up and that sort of stuff. They're heavier drones, and the drones got to really quite big things, the size of, I don't know, I suppose you could say a Tiger tank, couldn't you? The heavier drones are basically machine and bullet intelligences in huge tank bodies with incredible armor field generators. And they can wield a whole bunch of different weapons up to a plasma bombard, which is one of the most deadly weapons, I think, in Antares.
Yeah.
So there it says. There it is.
All those reasons why I love the Concord the most.
Yeah, they're quite reliable. If you like shooting, they will be able to shoot. They are really quite reliable. You can just say shoot, and they almost always will be able to hit somebody or multiple targets and cause problems. In the picture Rocky's got up, you've got that strike force, the starter army. So you've got what looks like a command squad. You've got two normal strike squads. You've got a weapon drone, which is that circular thing. And then you've got a support unit who have got an X launcher, which is sort of like a futuristic mortar. But this is the other thing about the Concord, is that they can also shoot loads and loads of specialist weapons from that mortar, such as grip munition, which pins the unit in place. There's a blur, which makes it difficult to shoot through. They've got a scrambler shell, a scrambler field, which can really cause havoc with high-tech opponents because it basically strips away all their high-tech capabilities. And I could go on.
Yes, you could. You're doing an excellent job. Heck, we're just listening. Like he said, he's narrating a book. It's like we're mesmerized.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, it's like bedtime stories with Tim. There was a small gnome.
Or wake up in the morning.
Yeah. The main in the background. So the main thing about the Concords is actually the actual intel is fairly reserved. It's more concerned about trying to save the lives of its people or promote the well-being of its soldiers, which is a little bit odd, given that these are soldiers taking part in some pretty nasty battlegrounds. So it can be a bit cautious, I suppose. But that suits players who prefer to stand back and shoot, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's a great element from like a narrative perspective too, because I love science fiction, and in most science fictions, AIs are always this like malevolent force where it's like they're always trying to like take over the world or, you know, stomp out the human race. And it's really sweet that the Intel is the exact opposite. It really just wants to make you feel good, feed you a sandwich before you even realize you're hungry. Like, yeah. It's really cool because it's really just something I feel like that isn't explored enough, especially in war games, because you know what I mean. Everything is usually so bleak.
Yeah, that's been the tendency, isn't it? Really, I mean, it was led obviously by the endemic 40k, I suppose, because they put a whole load of stuff on that, and Rick's mentioned before why 40k ended up the way it did, but I think that's the refreshing thing about Antares. It tries to say, well, actually, to be honest, yes, there's going to be conflicts, and some conflicts can't be avoided, like between the Isaurians and the Panhuman Concord. The Concord and the Isaurians have basically got this huge antiviral things, these nanospore, and it's like two antivirus engines coming in contact with each other. If you ever try to you know, they both say, I've been infected with a virus. And he's like, no, it's just antivirus. No, it's another. So they just can't help attack each other. You know, when one appears, it's not a case of, all right, we'll let them have that planet. So the Intel automatically says, oh my goodness me, I'm about to be infected with, which is very appropriate, I think, at the moment, but I'm about to be infected with a virus. Let's attack it. Let's get rid of it. So it's this is never-ending conflict there, which you just can't do anything about.
And that's another sweet thing, is that it's so cool to imagine, because it's like the Concord can take over a planet almost by accident, just by showing up. You know what I mean? If they're less advanced than the Concord, and there's not that technological defense ready to stop the nanosphere from just enveloping them, it just happens. So it's just like it's a really cool, you know, you're being invaded by an alien force, but it's just because you don't have a firewall up.
Yeah, you don't even know it's happening. That's the
director of a new planet's just like, wait, ham sandwich it was just slid under my door. What's I'm hungry, right?
I'm hungry though.
So McMurray, from your aspect, you've never heard this before. Is there anything that stood out? Did it make sense to you what he was talking about?
What I did just catch was, like, if all of a sudden ham sandwich slid under your door, you'd be all in support of that. And I'm not going to argue with that.
Who would?
Especially at the present, right about now, that'd be a pretty strong runner-up for, all right, man, I'll throw behind you.
He's looking at his door at the moment. He's just hoping.
Yeah, it's right to the left of me. You're exactly right, Kevin. The mail slot's just sitting there, not with any ham sandwiches stuffed through it.
The thing is, if one doesn't turn up, it means that Concord has decided that you're not really that hungry and you need to go on a diet.
It's getting real personal now.
Yeah. Which sort of leads into the terrifying aspect of the Concord. And it's super divisive.
True.
Like, anytime you post about the Concord on the Intel, it's always like 50,000 comments of people arguing whether the Concord is like benevolent or like the most terrifying thing that's ever existed.
Yeah.
Because if you disagree with what the Concord wants, maybe you want to be fat and sassy, you can't. The Concord is going to decide that you're going to be fit and healthy all the time.
I never in a million years thought that we'd be talking about Concord and fat and sassy would be in the same sentence.
I was actually that's interesting, because I was training a lot of America parallels earlier, and then I realized that part of the beautiful part about America is if you want to be fat and sassy, boy, you go ahead and you get it. Never mind, maybe not.
Be hard.
Yeah. I definitely don't envision the Concord as like in America or a U.S. amalgamate in the future. It's definitely opposite to what Americans would usually think of as good.
Well, yeah. The thing is, though, once you are in that independent state of mind and you're brought up in that, it's not independent state. Once you're brought up in that dependent state of mind, you are likely to regard independence as a real mental deficiency. What do you mean you want to? What do you mean you want to go and drive your own car?
Oh yeah, I would be like, wait, you own property? What's that?
What's that about? Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm right back to being proud to be an American.
Right. and to Sergey's point too, it is like it creates these really interesting mental images in your mind as to like, because it's like I'm in love with the Freeborn right now, and it's crazy to imagine like a meeting of the two factions, because the Freeborn is kind of like, it's described in many times as like, the force that can kind of be a go-between. And so it's like really interesting, because I can imagine them as like kind of like sealing themselves off from the outside, activating their, what is it called? It's the anti-nanophage.
The nanophage?
Yeah, nanophage,
yeah.
where they can, you know what I mean? It almost creates a clean room where it's like, like it would be like this prim and proper Concord diplomat on one end, and then this like grubby Freeborn person. And that's the only way that they can communicate, because if they don't do that, it just assimilates them immediately.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. I love that about it.
Yeah, we can't. They've got to be so careful dealing with the Concords, and that if Concord soldiers may be allowed to go and holiday on some of the Freeborn, shall we say, pub districts.
Yes.
Sorry, I used to work in Portsmouth Dockyard, and
That's amazing.
whilst there were certainly loads of pubs outside the door, there was obviously oddly other things like people turning up on trains from 60 or 70 miles away to welcome the
Oh yeah.
the Matlows when they arrive back. But and you
Concord
can
soldiers have all this money they have no idea what to do with.
Yeah, exactly.
which is probably a little bit close to the edge, but you get the idea. And the Freeborn can offer all sorts of entertainment to the Concord troopers that the Concord troopers would never likely sample. But the flip side of it is the Concord troopers will probably not want to sample it. So the Freeborn have got to try and tempt them. But what they can't do, exactly as you said, is allow them to come in too many numbers so that their nanosphere is able to establish a foothold and start regenerating. So they've got to have the nanophages around. They've got to have these cleansing. They use transmat technology to strip nanosphere from objects and things. So they've got to have this cleansing transmat technology around all the time just to make sure they don't get taken over.
A quick question with the cleansing. So like when a Concord experiences like a drop off with a Freeborn and a nanophage is present, is the Concord soldier completely cut off from the MTEL?
No, that's the trouble. It can't. The thing is, this is we're talking about the Freeborn and the Concord interaction now. They can't strip everything out of the Concord soldier because the Concord soldier relies on the nanosphere that's around his body, or the nanospore that's actually in his body and going around his body. So it will activate all his comms. It will activate his identity. It will activate any health implants he may have. It will keep him, stable if need be. It'll plug into external health implants and all the rest of it. So they can't strip bodies. They've just got to be really careful and make sure that they're ready to take over anything, and that the Concord nanosphere doesn't get too strong. As soon as it gets above a certain threshold, they've just got to go in, flood the area with combat nanophages, and you're in the nanophages or combat nanocytes, and I don't know, ship the guy off the Freeborn zone, I guess.
So follow-up question to that, is there such thing as like a Concord deserter?
Well, that's interesting. I would imagine if a Concord soldier got cut off from the MTEL for too long, then it may be that he'd start to become more self-aware or more independent. Yeah, it's without the MTEL there to guide him and cater for his every need. And the MTEL soldiers are a little bit more independent than normal citizens anyway. They've been given some volition, they've been given some encouragement to actually go out and do stuff. So he would perhaps start getting a little bit concerned that he was losing his mind because things weren't happening. But then after that, perhaps he may well turn into something else. He would become the independent soldier. Which is interesting, but the Concord tries not to do that because that's not very good for the well-being of the individual concerned, of course.
Well, with that said, how that's something I wanted to cover was like so the Concord they have this automatic MTEL, the MTEL that just automatically fixes things without them thinking it, and it just does it. Now, how does that work for them? Because I know that they don't really have to think it. It's more like I've heard people say, well, the MTEL knows what's best for you. So, it's just going to do it for you without you doing anything about it or thinking about it. It's not going to make you do anything bad. If you have a bad thought, it's going to get rid of that. How does that part work with the Concord?
Rick often uses Amazon, the Amazon recommendation engine as an example. So, for example, he wrote a book a little while back about wargaming as a whole, and before it was published, it started appearing on his Amazon books we think are good for you recommendation list as this book by Rick Priestley on wargaming. This is sort of no, I wrote that book. So, just as when I was doing my masters, I was given there's a reading list, and it said this is your core compulsory reading list, about 15 books or whatever, and you think, okay, I'll better go up and get those. So I went onto Amazon, I bought the first one, and as soon as I bought the first one, the recommended books for you listed all the other 15 in order. So it's that sort of it's more that sort of prediction, that sort of help, rather than actual mind reading. The Intel is aware of some things about your habits, because it can predict you, just like the Facebook adverts will tend towards what you like or what you want, or the sites you visited off Facebook.
Sometimes you'll say, hey, we need to buy a new truck, and then all of a sudden it shows up in your Facebook. That was the closest Concord moment I've ever had.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Exactly. So it's far more that way biased rather than actual thought control. But if you wake up one morning and just think, I could really actually do with a slap up breakfast, what you'll probably find is that Concord will be guiding you towards the best local cafe to satisfy that urge, shall we say, but in a healthy fashion, of course. So the prediction capability is vast, and it will pick up on almost everything you do. So it's Facebook ads, Google ads, Amazon and the predictions, all of that lot combined into one, coupled with your health stuff. So I can see why people can be very scared by it.
On the same token, like you said, the citizens that already exist in it, that would be so familiar to them that the opposite, like you were saying, like independence would be weird to them, because they're just, like what's going on? Like, I'm not getting any suggestions or,
Yeah.
So that's another thing is neat, because I feel I see that debated on the Intel all the time, is a lot of people will mislabel the Concord as a civilization of like Borg drones that just do, whatever the Intel commands them to do, where it is more that they're individuals. It's just that integration and the way that it takes care of them from the outside looking in makes it seem like they have no, free will or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Algorithm take that view all the time. They look at the Concord and they just think you're just Borg clones. We don't want to be like you. That was as McMurray was saying earlier, they are, if you like, this attitude of free will, not quite as extreme as the Freeborn, of course. And they're saying, no, we don't want to be taken over by this. We don't want our lives governed. Except, of course, the odd thing is that the algorithm are a little bit more structured in their society, and they've got a very, very structured society, which is a bit ironic.
There's an example between the algorithm and the Concord that really drove it home for me with the differences. I think it was in Zillows, because it was the algorithm were super hardcore and disciplined, even though Zillows was making them incredibly uncomfortable because it's this hot jungle environment. And then it was juxtaposed to a Concord soldier, which their personal shard adjusted them perfectly. So it's like being in a spaceship, an Arctic planet, or the jungle. They're always just comfortable and and they never have to deal with that. And it was interesting because it was like the algorithm was almost making fun of the Concord soldier, because it's like, oh, the Concord are tough. Which was really cool. It kind of gives it a good perspective as to that perception.
Yeah, and that's the whole weaponry they're given is part and parcel of that. The plasmid weapons in the game terms are probably the most potent and flexible infantry weapon you can have. It's got a strap value 2, which is good armor penetration, in other words, or you can fire 2 shots a turn. You can set it onto multi-fire. The only weapon which might exceed it are the big SAN weapons, the big SAN plasma weapons.
Dual carbides?
Dual carbs, yeah. And
carbs,
they are, but they're carried by creatures which
is that how it's pronounced? I always assumed.
Dual carb. Yeah, they're carried by creatures which are sort of 3 or 4 times the size of people, and they're close to support weapons on themselves by themselves. The armor, hyperlight armor in game basically gives them a normal bonus of about +2, but it's intelligence, so it can react if it sees an incoming overhead artillery shell, for example. It will react and throw up a tougher field about the armor, so it gives them +3 armor, if you like. But on the other side of the coin is it can't quite react to things really close in and coming up really quite fast. Just can't react, so it only gives it a little bit of bonus. But it doesn't matter where it is, it always gets a bonus from this hyperlight armor.
I think it's the best armor in the game, hands down.
Oh, I don't think anyone would argue with you.
No, I agree. I mean, my son was taking Virai, which was tough cookie. And I think that the armor was the only thing that saved me. And
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because I played Bormites against the Virai. I never did again. Because my son is he's evil.
He must be really good. I just saw, was it Gaddis Gaming coming up saying they like Boromites and
Concord is my favorite faction, second to Bormites. That's our buddy Lee. He's another co-host on our show.
Yeah, there's two extremes there. Because the Boromites are the best hand-to-hand force you can get. I mean, normally Boromites will just wipe Virai off the floor. And if Boromites get into hand-to-hand with the Concord...
Oh, yeah. But I couldn't...
it's over.
He kept running around me. Like, he played a great avoidance game, and the kid's 15 years old. I'm just like,
brilliant.
Who is this kid? I've created a monster.
Yep. Virai are all about tricky, icky positioning.
Oh my god! And it surprised me because I was like, bore my riders, and he was just cut. What are you doing? He goes, surviving. I said, okay, whatever. Good answer. Hey, McMurray, it's been 30 minutes. You got any questions, buddy?
We're good.
We're good. Okay.
I got a question for Tim. So I guess it's a two-parter. So the first part is that, let's say a hypothetical situation, Concord Strike Trooper takes a mag round to his carbine. This nanosphere is capable of making repairs on the fly, correct?
Yeah.
So that brings me to the bigger question is, because I had like an idea for a story, low-key, high-key. And if a single Concord soldier was marooned, let's say on some kind of feral world, right?
Now we're talking hypotheticals.
Would the nanospore that he just possesses himself be able to create new, like if he passed out because it was regenerating his body, for instance, would it be able to create like more Concord structures? Or like if he didn't have a gun, would later on, after so much time, would it be able to just reproduce a carbine at some point?
Probably not. There just wouldn't be enough nanospore available to reproduce itself. If he was pretty saturated with it, perhaps, but normally you'd actually have to have a nanospore generator, because the nanospore will actually die out if it can't regenerate quickly enough. Then it'll gradually die out, and that's what New Who have got. That's basically why they have their staves and all the other stuff with them, so that it can keep on generating more nanospore.
So it's almost like it's like too advanced to replicate on its own, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it does replicate on its own, but it needs energy to do so, and it needs a critical mass to be able to do so effectively, because at the moment we've not calculated quite what that critical mass is. But a new Who on a planet could eventually get the nanosphere to multiply enough to be able to take over the planet, but that would probably take decades.
Yeah.
When you stop and think it's one man on a world which is, even on Earth, it took about 25,000 miles around or whatever. So you're a bit, that's a lot of surface area to cover with nanospore from one person.
Well, here's a question for everybody, and I know what I think, but I'm gonna put this towards Tim and Tabletop Warlords and McMurray if you want. Who would you say is Concord's mortal enemy? What is their most, like, not necessarily feared, but their most common maybe out of the lore, their most common, feared, worst mortal enemy, like
From like a gameplay perspective.
Gameplay perspective and lore, both.
Okay,
Two-part question.
Two-part question there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with the gameplay, guys. What do you think?
I would say Freeborn. Freeborn, yeah.
Freeborn makes sense from a numbers game because Concord's one of their weaknesses is the fact that they definitely number less. So it's a Sherman versus Tiger Tank kind of argument.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, any army that can manage to easily get in their faces is also good. So anything with like quickness, so certain elements of the Boramites, and definitely it definitely would depend on the way you play the different factions. And then the Gar truly are, they basically have so many different things that are specifically engineered to getting rid of the advantages of the higher societies. So that technology works against all the factions, but it is much more painful for the Concord because they spend so many points. You know what I mean? Like I usually get battlefields and med drones and spotter drones and everything, right? And then whenever I fight Sergei's Gar, one shot and it's all ripped away. You're just like,
Gar is what I was going to say, because that was the army my son played most frequently, and with the exception of him blowing up every once in a while, which was wonderful.
Best feeling.
He would keep firing with his long range weapons, and then he would bring that assault Gar from one flank of the table, and here I was perfectly spread out, and all of a sudden I started getting closer away. He would just sweep in, and I had to fight for my life. I was still trying to make these guys blow up with their long range weapons and managing that assault squad coming at me. And it's like, even though you had a bunch of, oh shoot, I forgot the name of the Grots. They're not Grots, but
Gar outcasts.
Yeah, the outcasts.
Yeah, the Gar outcasts, yeah.
And I made a mistake one time of focusing on them, and they were the distraction, and he got that assault squad into me so hard. Oh my gosh.
Once it's in, it's in. Yeah, you're not.
The worst part in that situation is if you focus on the assault squad, those who have no armor the outcasts, they get so close. And in one of the games, I don't think we filmed it. I think it was just a fun game. Sergei literally had a freaking shootout with like 2 strike squads versus 1 fully upgraded outcast squad. And once again, that numbers versus game, I was worried because literally he would fire so many rounds that like one Concord would die a turn no matter what, like soldier. And that was just, I was like, I only got 5.
Yeah, don't do it. You may have 20.
It would just turn into pink mist. But the problem is there's so many darn many of them that so it's, I would say, going back to it, that's probably the biggest thing. If there's a lot of enemies, the Concord starts to suffer. If there's targets that you can pick out, you're in a good spot. But yeah, the moment you have to really, that's why they have split fire, of course. But that once again is, that's a finesse style. So it's if you miss with that second shot,
Concord excel. Sorry.
You're good. Go ahead. I was just going to say that the only way to handle Gar is to pin him out. Like that's the only thing I've been able to do is to stay in cover and pin him out, and that's it. And that assault squad, if you can't pin him out, hey, good game.
Yeah, net ammo and split fire is the pathway to victory against Gar. But what I was gonna say is the thing to understand when you're playing Concord is they're not necessarily an extreme range army. They suffer against armies that don't care about extreme range. Like anyone who's using micro X launchers will outgun Concord from the farthest range. When they get to a medium range, they'll wipe those armies off the map. But then when they get to a very close range, they're losing again. So using Concord's heightened mobility with jump troopers and transports and all that is extremely important because you want to stay perpetually at a medium range.
Yeah. Sergey found out real quick that the Freeborn's X launchers
Yeah.
If you stand in the back
They're
line,
better. They're better at a long range.
well, same thing with Algren because they have
Yeah.
so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Algren and Freeborn are similar in that regard, but that's how they can take out the Concord. But it is very much scissors, paper, rock situation because, as you said, if the Concord get into that range where their carbines and everything else work at optimal distance, and they can split fire with the plasma lances, they then suddenly become the army to beat. They are so
absolutely.
difficult.
Yeah.
They will lay down a lot of fire on opponents. That plasma lance in each normal infantry squad, called a strike squad, has got a plasma lance as well. Or most people take a plasma lance, let's put it that way. Because
every squad, I take them in every squad.
Yeah, it's only 3 points. You're gonna take it.
That's 3 points. Still.
Yeah.
You can split fire, you can choose a different target. So you can lay down potentially up to 2 pins a turn, especially if you've still got a spotter drone in your squad. And what's more, it's got strike value 4, which means it's actually really good at starting to pin enemy units and GAR.
And Gar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The issue is, of course,
Two armies, my son played with the Gar and the Virai, and it's like I said, can you try something different? You know, just once. You know, and I found, I think you're exactly right, Sergey. Right in the medium range.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when he starts coming after you. you know.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep it medium range with the Vera.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Hold on a second.
Yeah. So
They're
as far as the lore goes, what do you say is their worst enemy?
Should we all say it in 3, 2, 1?
Cenotech.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. 3, 2, 1. Let's say a different version of the same thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely the Isaurians, simply because it's apart from the fact they share a really, really long border with the Isaurians on both the northern interface and southern interfaces. It comes back to this natural and automatic hostility of the nanosphere towards each other. You know, it's simply a case of that if both sets of units drop down onto a planet and happen to bump into each other, their intel will automatically scream there's an enemy, even if they're just a bunch of scientists. They'll just say we're being attacked. There we go. There's an Isaurian, complete with tentacles. That's an Isaurian commander. Thanks, Rocky. Even if it's just an exploration unit or a scientific unit going down onto the planet, soon as their nanospore interact, they'll register the fact that it's a hostile nanosphere, it's a hostile intel, therefore they're under attack, and therefore you'll have a really quick escalation. People coming in to do battlefield evacuations, you'll have supporting troops coming in and all the rest of it.
Just like 4 or 5 phase snipers.
Yeah. That's one for the Isaurian list. It's a nice one.
We'll talk about that later.
And whilst we're on phase sniper, it's probably worth mentioning the Concord speciality weapon, which is of course the subverter matrix, which, if you can get it delivered nicely, and
if
if you can get it delivered, is just deadly. It effectively projects a 15-inch field in which it can just usurp all the command and control systems of all the enemy units in the area. So each single one within that 15-inch area has to start making command tests. Otherwise, and if they fail, they lose their dice. They lose their order dice. And Antares, being an order dice based game, it's losing it like
most brutal.
Really nasty. Yeah, brutal.
Yeah,
it really is brutal.
If I'm remembering correctly, back to an old Freeborn Shard episode where you guys were discussing like tournament stats and whatnot, almost all Concord armies ran a subverter matrix in a tournament setting.
Yeah, and the worst, a lot of them have just started to develop the tactic of taking them along. If they've got the points, they take along a interceptor bike. That's a fast-moving bike squad as well. They compact the subverter matrix into the compactor buddy, which goes along with that bike squad. They zoom the bike squad up in right close to the enemy.
I did not know you could do that.
Oh no! Well, there we go.
I'm glad we didn't make a unit highlight about that.
I did not know that.
No.
I've done it twice.
That's amazing.
And
Yeah,
So wait,
John.
take a light support drone unit and compact it.
Yeah.
What?
I thought you boys knew that.
Apparently we
Coming
didn't.
for you.
So what they do is they bring up this subverter
Virtual high five?
matrix, unpack it. Yeah, mutual high five. Yeah, donk. They unpack it, and of course, it then starts playing havoc. The other thing about it is if there are probes within range, enemy probes within range of the subverter matrix, they just get destroyed. No saving roll or anything else. So it's really, really useful. And what you find is that as soon as you get a player with a bite unit, with a compactor drone, and with a subverter matrix, it all of a sudden becomes the target of every weapon on the table because people are dead scared of losing.
Yep.
Obviously, their probes and all the rest of it.
I surprised my son with that.
Yeah.
Guess what happened?
I'm gonna finish painting these, Sergey, real fast.
Yeah.
I did that once.
All Tim's fault.
The next time that I did it, my son was prepared because.
What did he do?
Okay. So it was Gar. I think it was Gar. He kept an assault squad in the back.
Yeah.
And he kept it there because every time I see an assault squad, I'm thinking, oh, flank charge, But he kept it in the back this time and just poured me with as much fire as he possibly could. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'll swoop this up here. Well, I didn't realize that he was waiting to pounce, and it just the dice was there, so he handled it. But
he was just waiting for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it kept him in the back this time. So I found a good counter to his assault, his flank assault, So it's just and never ever reveal to your 15-year-old son some of the secrets you're going to do in this game or strategies because he will take advantage of it. I'm just saying.
Well, that's the beauty of this game is in the milieu of war games. I would say it's one of the most interactive war games with reactions. It's like an old Magic the Gathering term. Like an interactive game is one that is not just like myopically throw damage at their face. It's react to them and posture and then make a reaction to that posturing. And I think Antares really opens you up to that because there's so much you can do in a turn and so much you can do to deal with what they've just done.
And I think that's what I love about the game is because there's so much strategy. It explores it's not like moving blocks, of troops, which I used to do with Warhammer Fantasy. And you knew with a few moves how far you could go and get in contact. Well, with Antares, you have these drones flying everywhere that can do things. You got bikes and, in my eyes, and I'm not saying this just because I don't like Warhammer or 40K, I never got that feeling out of 40K. I never got that feeling because you felt like when you were moving up, you knew what was going to happen. And there's only a certain few things. With Antares, and especially the Concord and how mobile they are, you can literally turn a pardon the expression shit situation and make it you. And
just the fact that it uses D10s makes that variety of situations happen.
Exactly.
I think the Intel would refer to that as a low probability success situation.
Yes.
So we're 50 minutes in. McMurray, do you have any questions at all? Anything you want to know?
This is a lot of stuff that I couldn't catch with the net. It's flying over my head so high. I don't know. I'm looking at Antares stuff now, so.
Oh, good. Well, see, I have all the armies, and when you come over, we'll get a game in. Exactly. And I think that the what's funny about this, and what we can wrap this up is what army best fits you, like the lore, personality, your strategy, how you play. And I'll just start off and say McMurray, the type of guy that he is, and the way he plays, Bormites would be the best for him, or Gar. He would enjoy
getting stuck in close. Yeah.
He is that type of person. Now he does play back sometimes, but I think that he would have the most fun playing Gar or Bormites. A teaching game, I think that I should throw the Concord at him so he can kind of, because the Concord I find are probably the most explainable for someone who's
that's probably true. Yeah.
Starting out. And that's why I think they're in the starter set because they're the most common. And the familiarity with the Space Marines and stuff like that. I mean, that helps too. But forget those guys. The Concord look better, I think. They don't. But they don't look like these bulky. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. But what I'm saying is,
I still love Warhammer. I have like Warhammer tattoos.
Shut up, Sergey.
I'm permanently branded, so like
fanboy.
they do something
The whole
horrible, I'm,
thing
like, stuck in supporting them.
The whole thing about all of this is different games for different situations and different faults. You know,
Absolutely. I love them. I love almost all. I haven't met many war games I don't like.
Sergey, with that said, what army best fits you? And then we'll go to Tim last.
Best fits me. Honestly, I would probably also either Boromite or Gar. I'm similar to McMurray in that vein, in that I like to get stuck in. I would much prefer a melee kill to a shooting kill any day of the week.
Virai too for you.
Yeah, Virai.
Virai. The look on your face when you were playing Virai was disturbing.
Yeah, they're so fun.
Like, I'm coming for you.
What about you, Kevin? What army fits lore, everything?
This video is perfect for me because Concord truly does. I've always been a fan of hard science fiction, and I would say Concord to me is the most similar kind of representation of almost like a Federation society if you're a Star Trek fan. And so I've always been there, but then the Freeborn are there for me when I'm feeling more sassy and I want to be the cool version of me, which is I'm just undoing the tie maybe an inch, you know what I mean? I'm like, ooh, tie.
All of a sudden he's smoking a cigarette while he's rolling his dice.
Hey, Sergey, you need to talk him into dressing up like Jack Sparrow for one of his videos when he plays Freeborn, because that would be just perfect.
We've been wanting to do Halloween episodes, but we always forget right before, so maybe we'll do that.
There you go. And then you got to make him do a drop kick as Jack Sparrow. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
And if you were to describe which the lore, you're the lore master of Antares, what army would best describe you, and what do you have most fun playing?
What army would best describe me? I have got absolutely no idea.
Should we pick?
The trouble is, everybody knows me as Mr. Gar, and the reason I absolutely love playing Gar is because they are so crazy. Basically, they are a win big, lose big army. If people can shoot at you and they can just blow your units up, and you find your unit gradually just destroyed as its plasma reactors just start exploding bit by bit by bit. And there's a friend of mine who's actually got a huge plasma pin marker, so every time we explodes one of my Gar battle suits, he insists on putting that on the unit and not one of my normal little ones. That's Andy Sharman. So I really love the Guard just because they're fun, and I frankly I play these games for fun. But the other group I do love are the Concord. It's not because the Gar and the Concord were in the starter box, but I actually love the aesthetic. I actually love the background for the Concord, and actually just love just seeing them around and moving them around on the table. I'm not necessarily that successful with the Concord, though. I'm not particularly successful. But they're probably second. So I've got, and frankly, it's probably reflecting the size of my armies. I've got more Gar and Concord than I have anybody else. Third, I don't know, probably comes on to the Freeborn, simply because they're just different, and you can play them in so many different ways. And there's just you can either have a small elite force,
gives you a chance to act like a pirate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. You go, all right. or you can just run these loads of dregs all over the place. So those are probably those three are my favorites.
Excellent. Well, that's the Concord. We did it, fellas. We talked about the Concord for 55 minutes. That's crazy. No,
I could say so much more.
Like 2 more hours.
Yeah. No, there is so much more to say, isn't there, Sergey? I mean, It's
So maybe
there's
we'll revisit it sometime.
tactics. Yeah, maybe, because there's so much you can talk about the tactics. We've mentioned this compacting the drones, and if you want to look it up, it's on page 112, paragraph 2 of the rule book. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah.
I can't believe we missed that. Kevin's been
But
playing
there's things you
Concord
can do
forever.
with the squads, like sort of leap forward, leapfrogging them.
Yeah.
So one and splitting fire at the same time.
Yeah.
So one shoots at a squad threatening the other squad. If you see what I mean, whilst they're shooting at the squad that's threatening them, then the other squad comes forward and does the same. And if you get it going well, you're really posing a real problem for your opponent, because even if they draw order dice, they're making command tests all the time. And then if you accomplish that with a real combined arms ethic, so you've actually got support drones in there as well to lay down covering fire and to fend off light vehicles, it becomes a army which really feels like a proper futuristic army should be.
Yeah, and I think that's why it has the most draw for me too. Is that it really does, kind of going back to your comparison between war games, Matt. Is that Concord is a great example of how Antares better models actual and modern combat, as opposed to a lot of other war games where it really does feel like it's just black powder, where you're just like lining up one army and you're like, okay, aim. It's like, you know what I mean? It really does require you to like take very much care for each individual unit. Like when you're about to win with Concord and you have a good strategy, it almost feels like you need to start like classical music before you start. You know, it's like, oh, good sir, I'm very ready. Like they just like step after step after step, and someone's just like, what is going on? You were just dumping pens on me.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to have something about music with the factions. For me, the GAR always got that Benny Hill music, or one of those sort of black and white comedy music. Yeah, that's the GAR.
Kevin actually does that all the time when I play the guy. It's in our battle reports.
Well, thanks guys for being here. I really appreciate it. As always, and we will definitely do this again. I think next we should do the Freeborn. I think that would be fun.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Matt, you say this is going on our page?
Hmm?
Well, is this getting on is this a war room? Like, is this on the war room YouTube?
Yeah.
Correct.
All right. And sorry, but I got to ask Tim at least one dumb question.
Go for it.
That's right.
Otherwise, there'd be no point. Tim, you were talking about how this military was like quadrillions of people and stuff.
Yep.
What? So you might have missed our dinosaur episode, but I tend to be. Oh, great! Matt turned his camera off. Yeah, I can see you rolling your eyes through the Rockies War Room logo.
No, my children are talking.
Benefits and costs on a logistical standpoint are always something that we have to think about. Which, if you watch the dinosaur episode, I went into a little bit of detail on just the benefits that you could get out of dinosaurs in the modern day. But anyways, long story short, question being, how on earth would you coordinate something like a Taco Tuesday or Casual Friday in the military that's quadrillions of people? It just seems like a supply chain nightmare.
I think the critical thing to remember is that there are 2.5 million systems, 2 to 2.5 million systems, star systems, that's in the Concord. So you're not necessarily talking about coordinating it across all of those systems. All you're doing is actually focusing on a specific area on a specific battlefront at any one point in time. So,
that makes sense.
Sorry?
No, I'm saying that makes sense. If there's different planets, and obviously Taco Tuesday would be on different days, and it wouldn't be a big deal. Good call.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So
Man has all the answers.
Well, thank you. So the whole thing about logistics is incredibly dispersed anyway, for a start. But actually, their logistics is, one of the things about the American military is that it is famed throughout the world for its logistics capability. probably more than anything else. And I know you've got the special units and all the rest of it. But you can imagine that on steroids, because in the Concord, you don't just have loads of intelligent drones, but you've got loads of semi-intelligent drones who, more so than we could ever imagine, will just do anything you want. You want a taco delivered? Where do you want it delivered to? Oh, just give it to one of our little drones. Oh, we've run out of drones. Oh, we'll just manufacture another 1,000,000. So
Were you guys talking about being a fat turd wasn't going to work out because it would just be like, no, you can have more tacos and beer, even if you have the drones. You're like, oh, really?
that's the big issue, McMurray. That's the big issue. You've had too many of these tacos.
Tim,
No, clone.
Concord taco drones need to be a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. They removed
Proves
pins.
that the Concord Society is the highest society in all of Antares space.
Exactly. If you can get a taco in the middle of battle, you are the apex predator.
There you go. There you go. There's another scenario. Taco Tuesday scenario. There you go. Well, hey guys, we've been on for an hour. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to end it there. It's been great. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us. Kevin and Sergey, thank you so much, man. I'm looking forward to watching your next video. The last one was great. I appreciate it. The brood mother and going in detail. I mean, there's nothing out there like that, and that's awesome. And I even that's another thing I was going to add on real quick. With Antares, and I'm just going to leave it everything with this, but with Antares, there's always something new that you learn from the game. Always.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
never fear. It's always a learning experience,
Mm-hmm.
But tactics and little things, watching you guys, I've discovered a few myself, like, of little rules. And I go, wait a minute.
Is that a thing?
Oh,
Yeah.
really? And stuff like that. So, but Tim, as always, thank you, Kevin, Sergey, McMurray. Thanks for joining us. And last
Thanks,
but not least, from me to you, ta-ta.
Ta-da!
And we'll catch you guys our next Antares episode.